Veterans, you may not know it, but there is a fight for your rights actively going on as we speak, even with the government shut down. It's pretty impressive, to be honest with you. Sad, but impressive. What you need to know is that there recently was a Senate hearing on the VA disability system. Now, within this hearing, it's about an hour and 43 minutes long. We're going to cut down the pieces that matter the most. We're going to understand who these actors are and what they're pushing for. And unfortunately, in this hearing alone, it doesn't cover the full battlefield, but we'll get into that as well. So let's get started. Now, first we need to talk about who the Senate members are that are actually in this committee. Mr. Moran is a Republican senator from Kansas. Now, his introduction is pretty objective, right? It's pretty flat. He's not saying that he's really already going into this wanting to expand the system, nor is he wanting to decrease benefits or increase regulation on them. His opening statement's just pretty flat. So let's move on to the next one. And then we have Senator Richard Blumenthal, Mr. Blumenthal. He introduces himself and comes on very strong about expanding the healthcare system, expanding VA benefits, and honestly, having a very, very positive outlook on what he wants the benefit system to look like. Mr. Blumenthal is the Democratic representative from Connecticut.
VA disability compensation is too generous. That's how the system has been portrayed by some opponents of the system in past years.
Mr. Blumenthal even calls out people who are cherry-picking statistics and facts without full context that make it look like the VA disability system is too generous. All right, veterans, now we're going to jump ahead here and we're going to listen to retired Lieutenant Colonel, because that's the most important thing, Daniel Gade. And let's hear what this veteran, who is also a wounded warrior and an amputee, has to say about veterans' benefits. Might shock you.
My testimony will differ from most you've heard. I'm a member of no veteran service organization and have no motive other than to help restore the lives and dignity of millions of veterans. For too long, you've been told that the best way to care for veterans is to shovel billions of taxpayer dollars into their pockets. This approach has resulted in a veteran class that is sicker, more marginally employed, and more suicidal than ever. By paying veterans to be sick, we create more sick veterans, separated from meaningful lives of purpose, and we deepen our suicide crisis.
Wow. So off the rip, this guy's take is that because we pay veterans disability, they are sicker, they stay sick, they're weaker, they're contributing less to society. Our suicide numbers are going up because of disability ratings. It's a pretty bold take. And mind you, this guy was the Veterans Disability Commissioner for Virginia, he just said, for 2 years in the past. I would say that this is surprising, but I've actually met this guy before. But let's keep going. Let's see what he has to say.
Perspective through hard experience and long study. I was wounded in combat twice, losing my right leg and spending a year at Walter Reed. After recovery, I earned a master's degree and joined the White House Domestic Policy Council, where my previously acquired user-level experience was bolstered by my...
What? Hold on. He said that after he lost his leg in combat, he spent a year at Walter Reed, and then he went to go get his master's degree, and then he joined a White House council? I'm just going to put this out there. Do you know any enlisted veterans? I know a lot of enlisted dudes that got Purple Hearts, amputees. Do you know any of them that were able to just go get their master's degree? They didn't have other concerns in life. They weren't worried about what they were going to do, where they were going to live, how they were going to eat. They just got out and went and got their master's degree and then worked at the White House. Does it sound like Mr. Gade might have had his life set up for him already? I don't know. Let's keep going.
My work alongside both the Joel Shalala Commission and the Scott Commission. I later completed a PhD in public policy focused on the VA claims process, and while teaching at West Point, co-led the Independence Project, a randomized control trial demonstrating the powerful link between employment and health. In 2021, I published Wounding Warriors, How Bad Policy is Making Veterans Sicker and Poorer, and recently served 2 years as Virginia's Commissioner of Veteran Services. The surge in disability claims is not due to combat injuries, but to a culture that rewards illness.
The surge in disabilities is not due to combat injuries. It is due to a culture that rewards sickness. Wow. He must be real fun at parties.
Last year alone, over 450,000 new compensation recipients entered the system, while total combat wounded from the global war on terror number around 50,000. Last year, more than 270,000 veterans began receiving compensation for tinnitus, which is 100 times the number of GWAT amputees over a 20-year period. Blessedly high survival rates from combat wounds are not the cause of the growth.
I'm not sure what kind of math he thinks he's doing. He's kind of stating numbers. There's 1,000 Toyotas to 500 Volkswagens. Okay, well, Toyota's a more popular car, right? He states that there's significantly more. There's 10 times more people claiming tinnitus. Well, he says tinnitus, which I don't know how you get a PhD and say tinnitus. But regardless, right, he's saying that there's 10 times more people claiming tinnitus than there are amputees from the global war on terror. No, right? For every one combat troop that goes into battle in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, anywhere in GWA, right? How many airmen maintained the aircraft that flew it there? How many worked on it? How many Army and airmen worked on the landing field, right? On the airfield, surrounded by the loud engines every single day? And then how many of those people were adjacent to it, right? Or they worked near somewhere where there was gunfire, right? Even if you were in the biggest fob on Kandahar in Afghanistan, right? The ability to get tinnitus between military vehicles, any sort of maintenance job, anything under the sun, sleeping next to a Generac, right? There's numerous ways, not to mention indirect fire exposure, which has almost nothing to do with being in a direct line of combat, right? There was no front line in Afghanistan, right? It did not dictate or discriminate upon whether you were a mechanic or a grunt. That logic, well, I mean, there just isn't any logic. He's just saying numbers to sound smart, which is one of the most dangerous things, right? Bill Gates, right, famous for having a picture with a book called How to Lie with Statistics. Mr. Gade obviously bought that book.
The avalanche of claims is driven by nonprofits and pay-to-play claims companies that encourage veterans to selectively exaggerate or falsify symptoms to, quote, grab all they can, end quote.
Holy shit. Mr. Gade, you just went and you just gave a sweeping indictment of everybody from VSOs to my company to any other company that exists out there. Encourages veterans to exaggerate? In no world do I do that. I can't speak to the VSOs, but I can tell you when I did go to a VSO, no, they weren't that helpful, but they damn sure were encouraging me to exaggerate, right? This dude is jaded, but we're going to get to a conclusion on him in just a moment.
Aging, genetic, and lifestyle conditions are increasingly labeled service-connected, resulting in tens or hundreds of thousands of veterans rated as 100% disabled who have no true incapacity or whose incapacity would have eventuated regardless of service status. I propose two principles of reform. One, meaningful employment is powerful medicine. A 2020 paper called Employment a, quote, critical mental health intervention. Unfortunately, veteran participation in the labor market, especially among men in prime working years, is markedly lower than their civilian counterparts and has been steadily declining over the past 20 years. Disability compensation discourages work by rewarding inactivity. Some programs, like IU, create a direct barrier to work. Any separation from the labor force causes isolation, malaise, and reduced income, coupled with a demand for ever higher disability payments. We should shift dollars from paying veterans to be sick towards meaningful incentives for gaining and maintaining productive employment. Early positive incentives can have a long-lasting positive effect, as demonstrated by the Independence Project.
Right here. That's enough of this guy talking. I'm going to be honest with you. Mr. Gade, I hope you see this. You were detached. And why do I say this? You see the world through your view. You think that I was wounded, and you overcame this, and you got your master's degree, and then you worked at the White House, and then you had a successful political career, and you continue to testify in front of Congress where people view you as an expert. Maybe you are, but you're an expert at your lived experience. And I have to tell you that you were an officer. You made enough money to save money. You had enough connections. You already had a college degree. You would have had a meaningful career had you not gone and gotten your master's degree, had you not gone and got your PhD. I assure you that your current net worth, one could assume, is far greater than that of any enlisted persons getting out. All this goes to say, when you talk about employment being good medicine, I don't disagree whatsoever. But I could not disagree with you more about veterans being involved in the labor market. I have to tell you that my situation was pretty unique. I got in at 17, right? Was wounded at 19, was out before I was 21, very much in my prime. But mentally, I had PTSD. I had survivor's guilt. I had things that would take me almost a decade to work through, and I still battle to this day. Not only that, but of course I had physical injuries too from being a paratrooper, from getting wounded in Afghanistan, right? And I got to tell you, being a cavalry scout, right? I was entrusted with a machine gun. I was entrusted with men. I was entrusted with hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment, vehicles, and guns, and explosives, and you name it, right? But when I got out, do you know what I was qualified to do? I was qualified to be a janitor or a cable guy. And that's not to put those jobs down. But it is quite hard to go from being paid zero money almost to be an enlisted soldier to then go into the civilian workforce and try to carve out a living for yourself working a menial job that has no way up. The American dream that these men and women fought to preserve and to grow, they themselves are not getting to take part in it because they are shoveled out of the system the second they are no longer useful. And then what do? And you have the audacity to sit here and tell us, tell the world, testify to Congress as if you are the one, as if your life experience is indicative of whatever veteran experiences. You have the audacity to sit there and do this while having no clue. All right, veterans, let's listen to Mr. Ryan Gallucci from the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Silly hat and all, let's see what he has to say.
When Americans raise their right hand, they sign a binding contract to surrender freedoms, obey orders, and if called, march into combat. In return, our nation promises care and benefits. That promise is not charity, it's a contract. For our enlistees, it's enshrined in DD Form 4. Every veteran who served honorably has kept their end of that contract. Yet lately, headlines question whether our veterans really deserve it. The Washington Post, The Economist, and others have said that benefits are absurdly generous, that fraud is rampant, or suggest that a disability industrial complex of VSOs profits off the system. We've heard it before. In the 1930s, when the Economy Act slashed benefits, at the recommendation of Archibald Roosevelt, and in the 1950s, when Omar Bradley chaired a commission that tried to strip benefits from the less disabled and questioned toxic exposure. We buried those bad ideas then, and it is our duty to bury those bad ideas today. Fraud exists in large systems, Medicare, Social Security, and yes, VA, but it's rare and it's prosecuted when it's found. What's not rare are the invisible wounds of war, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, chronic pain, or cancers caused by toxic exposure. To claim these wounds are embellished or fake is either ignorant or cruel. Invisible does not mean imaginary. Reporting like the Post's misrepresents key facts. They tell readers that more than 500,000 veterans are service-connected for seemingly minor skin conditions, failing to note that 76% of these veterans are rated at 0%. If you add in 10% ratings, which often do not affect compensation, that number jumps to nearly 94%. The data set does not support rampant exaggeration and fraud.
Right there, Vets. I want to point out what Ryan Gallucci just called out expertly, right? These people are lying with statistics. There is an agenda. Now, what that agenda is, I'm not entirely sure, right? What is the motive to decrease veteran benefits? If you ask me, it's because people who don't want well for this country don't want veterans having stability. Veterans are the backbone of this country. Veterans disproportionately start small businesses. Veterans disproportionately contribute to their communities. Veterans disproportionately have stronger friend groups, right? It's just a fact, right? And I think that there might be some incentive there for someone who has ill will. That being said, he points it out just so well. People are lying with statistics. The Washington Post wanted to talk about how 76% of veterans have a skin condition rating, right, for something that's not an issue. But as he pointed out, those are all 0% ratings, right? How insane is that? It's pretty interesting, not to mention the amount of skin cancer issues. Like, go check out the Hunter 7 project. How many skin cancer issues and toxic exposure cancers have come up from normal screenings or skin conditions or started as such? It's pretty wild. Let's keep going.
Fraud. Plus, the Post conveniently ignores the unique occupational hazards of military service and why skin and foot conditions are so common. There's a reason it's called trench foot. It is easier to claim benefits in 2025, but this is a feature, not a flaw. Reforms like the Pact Act leveled the playing field for those poisoned by burn pits and toxics and other toxins. We fought deliberately to improve access because past generations have suffered in silence. PTSD claims have drastically risen in recent years, but it's naive to think PTSD is new. Past conflicts labeled it soldier's heart or shell shock, and it was a condition we tried to hide. Today, veterans talk about mental health because it's okay to have PTSD and it's okay to claim your benefits. Because we talk about it, veterans are fighting stigma for all Americans.
And I'm going to pause right there. I think he made a great point once again, but I want to bring something else up, right? I think he missed a great opportunity here. When we help Vietnam veterans here at vetclaims.ai, do you know how many of them didn't even know, like PTSD wasn't nomenclature. PTSD wasn't a thing, right? The first use of the term PTSD wasn't until 1980. You're talking a decade after the Vietnam War, right? That is pretty insane. No wonder these veterans are now claiming it when they didn't know it was a thing or it wasn't a thing when they got out, right? In fact, it was a thing of shame. It was something they tried to hide. I saw this in my own grandpa, saw it in my grandma. I saw the way they referred to it, right? Veterans of that era, it wasn't a thing, right? And more so, they were shamed if they showed it. So of course, those claims are going to double, triple, quadruple, right? As this older generation realizes, I can file this claim. As influencers like myself and CivDiv and whoever else out there is making videos talking about the claim system, right? Like them or not, there's a whole generation of people, maybe you're one of them, that is now learning what these benefits truly entail for you and for that generation and for all veterans. So let's keep going.
The cost may seem jarring, but this is the sobering true cost of 2 wars many households could afford to overlook. Disability compensation is the settlement of a debt for the social and occupational losses associated with the real and persistent...
I am going to stop talking about the VFW's funny hats if Mr. Gallucci keeps making so many damn points. This guy is knocking it out of the park. I don't know if you caught what he said there. He said the cost is jarring, but this is the cost of a war, of 2 wars, that many households could overlook. What does that mean? It means that we went to 2 wars, more than that if you know, right? And many households didn't have a family member get drafted. They didn't have someone in the war, right? That's different. To us, it's what we know, right? But if you go back to Vietnam, the draft was a thing. If you go back before Vietnam, the draft was always a thing, right? We fought 2 wars that many households could afford to overlook. So yes, there is going to be a cost for supporting those veterans after the fact. 10 points, Mr. Ryan Gallucci.
A paycheck doesn't erase a missing limb, and a steady job doesn't cure a damaged lung. The all-volunteer force understands that military service is dangerous. We choose to serve because service is authentic and necessary. And in our contracts, the United States committed to make us whole when we were ordered to combat or other hazardous situations. Unfortunately, perverse incentives exist, such as concurrent receipt kicking in at 50% disability, or family care that kicks in at 100%. Bad policy can drive bad behavior, but Congress should fix the policy and not blame the veteran. On fraud, let's talk about claim sharks, who often promise benefit increases by submitting questionable evidence for a hefty and illegal cut of the action. The VFW has led the fight against this scourge, not to profit, but to support veterans and protect the non-adversarial benefit process. The VFW has testified before Congress 15 times over the last 3 years, raising this alarm. We've had countless conversations with the committee seeking to stop the fleecing of veterans and taxpayers, but our calls have gone unheeded, and we're now targets of the Washington Post, accusing VSOs of embellishing. Our accredited representatives are bound by strict ethics regulations in 38 CFR. We tell veterans what they need to know, not what they want to hear. And we invited the VA General Counsel to audit our training in 2021, an offer that still stands 4 years later. It costs VFW and our partners tens of millions of dollars each year to provide this service because every veteran deserves an honest advocate, not a profiteer.
As we come to the end of what Mr. Gallucci is saying, that line right there, veterans deserve an honest advocate and not a profiteer. I agree, but I hope you understand that capitalism is the way forward, right? It costs your organization, the VFW, tens of millions of dollars a year, you said, to support veterans. That's great, but I guarantee at vetclaims.ai, our process is more holistic, more thorough, more efficient, more expedient, and more successful. And how do I know this? Because out of the 4,000 or so veterans that came through here last month, a lot of them had the VFW, had the DAV, had the American Legion, had one of these other VSOs as someone who initiated helping them. And the number of things that they missed, the lack of support that they gave them, the lack of preparation that was provided. It is not an indictment of your organization's not caring. It's an indictment of how a nonprofit simply cannot scale to provide the true customer experience that is needed to navigate such a complex process and have meaningful, effective, and repeatable results. So, are we profiteers? Absolutely not. We could charge 5 times more. We could take 30% of the back pay like VA accredited attorneys do. We could take 5 or 6x the increase like many of our competitors do. But no, we charge $1,250 a flat rate fee. So I hope you see this. I invite you to any sort of conversation, debate, public or private, and would love to continue the conversation because I think you make some great points, but I think that America needs to evolve. And we need to open the system to capitalism and the free market.
Many other public servants, they can't just walk away if they don't want to do it anymore. We serve in accordance with the contract we signed, and many now live with the illnesses that steal their sleep, breath, and ability to work. Suggesting they embellish their suffering for some money is insulting. The VA system must work better. Simpler forms, improved access to exams, and reliable technology. But veterans and their VSOs are not the problem. We appear before Congress dozens of times every year asking for some nuanced reforms that sometimes come to fruition, other times don't. And as we speak, the government shutdown disrupts our work as critical deadlines approach. Veterans can't afford to wait. We must reopen the government to avoid unnecessary pain and hardship for our defenders. Members of the committee, the all-volunteer forces carried this nation through the last quarter century of war.
Okay, so we've gone through 2 of the people that are on this committee hearing, and I'm going to be honest with you. What the VA chair said, nothing exciting. What the DAV guy said is we need more technology. Why? Because they themselves are trying to bolster some form of technology. The Veterans of Foreign Wars are the only ones who made valid points, and Mr. Gade is the only one who said something so absolutely atrocious that I just had a conniption. What's going to come from this Senate hearing? Nothing. It's pandering. It's a political response to the Washington Post paper to show that people are putting in work and to make it look like the government is taking it serious, and it'll all get washed under the rug. There will be no effectual outcomes from this. But then you might be asking yourself, you said, Luke, there's a fight for my rights. What's going on? Well, that's where this gets interesting. There are currently 2 bills that have been proposed, right? Both of them still in the House. I don't think either one of them will go forward, and we'll make a whole nother video getting into depth of these pretty soon. But what you need to understand is there are people like Daniel Gade who want to continually push and push and push to minimize veterans' benefits. There's not going to get support for that. It's not going to happen. And even if they did have support for it, no president or Senate would touch it because they could guarantee they'd never get elected again, right? Now, so who is the real contender? Well, you have the people like the VFW and the DAV. They continually are going to lobby, which is interesting, right? Because they're nonprofits. They legally can't lobby. But they can show up and testify in front of Congress somehow. It's pretty interesting. But they're congressionally chartered, so leave it as it is. They can show up and they can push and advocate for these things to happen, which is pretty interesting. And they want no one besides VSOs to be able to help you. That's right. If it were up to people like Mr. Ryan Gallucci, the VFW, and the DAV, and the bills that they've pushed forward, you, as a veteran, would have no choice but to go to one of their lovely nonprofits. Sounds fun, doesn't it? That's the only option you get, because you're too dumb to make a decision on how to spend your money or get help. That's right, you, the veteran who drove a tank, operated a machine gun, led men through the valleys of Afghanistan, perhaps, jumped out of planes, fired multi-million-dollar rocket launchers, maintained multi-hundred-million-dollar aircraft, perhaps, right? You, the enlisted veteran, the veteran in general, are too stupid to be able to make a choice on how you spend your money. That is what the DAV and the VFW are currently saying. They're pushing for laws that advocate this. It's pretty wild. On the other side of things, you have NAVR, which is this lobbying group who ironically calls themselves the National Association for Veterans' Rights. What are they? They're a posse of people who enjoy charging 5 and 6x and 10x the back pay, or the increase, I should say, 5 and 6x the increase that a veteran may get from each claim. Now, do I think that they're the devil? No, I don't. They're not the worst contender out there by any means. But they want to make any business model that isn't theirs illegal. Meaning they want to shut down the free market to technological innovation, to SaaS products, to future tech, right? To anything that is not them, they want to shut it down. I don't know why. I don't know what the incentive is. I think they're trying to protect themselves, but to protect themselves while cutting off any future innovation or other models is just kind of silly. So, veterans, I'm going to keep it simple. The VA benefits question is a ticking time bomb. It really is. Much like this stick of dynamite. It's not going to get better. It's not going to disappear. The question's going to persist. What matters is that your voice, our voice, is heard. As formerly enlisted veterans, we got out and we worried about what we were going to do to live, to eat, what our life was going to be like. When officers get out, they worry about where they're going to get their MBA. And that's not to say anything in general against officers, it's just a different reality. And there is a massive problem that we are not represented at this table. We are not being heard. Our voices are not being heard. Our life experience and our reality is not being understood. Meanwhile, policy is being drafted, enacted, pushed that will affect not just our lives, but the lives of all future warfighters. I need you to like, I need you to subscribe, I need you to share this video, share other videos. I need you to help us grow. I ask you to believe in me as I continue to fight forward and ensure that the lived experience of the enlisted veteran is seen, heard, and understood. Here at vetclaims.ai, we're going to continue ensuring that veterans get the rating they deserve, fast, effectively, and continually.